Hi everybody. Originally I was going to talk about inclusion and exclusion in the channel. I'll save that for part two. What I'll talk about is what people would expect, that I discuss my own experiences with inclusion and exclusion, times that I had been brought into groups or had been locked out from groups, and similarly when I may have been part of a group that decided to include or exclude. And I don't know that there's any particular insights. In fact, I think a lot of this will be universal, that we've all experienced times when we are part of a group or we are locked out of a group, and that we have had to make those discretion decisions as well. So I have, say, some formative experiences with exclusion. That is, when I was about 9-10 years old, our family came back from Europe, settled in a small town in the leafy suburbs of the northeastern US. The, say, primary heritage or cultural heritage of this town were mainly Irish Americans and French Acadians, and I was neither of those, so I didn't exactly fit in. And it was still at the time a place that had kind of a rural mindset, where people often had lived there for generations. So being also newcomers to the town, we were, and I was, first a social outcast and then downright a pariah for about 3 or 4 years. So that was not easy as a kid. But you learn a lot from being in that position. I didn't have the tools to understand how I was supposed to fit in. I was still too young, and then I also was, neither cognitively nor culturally adept at kind of figuring out how I'm supposed to fit into this social fabric. So that made for a tough several years where I had few friends, but the ones that I made, we are still friends to this day. And that is, I guess the upshot of this is that 40 and some odd years later, we still are in touch and we still get together once in a while when we have the chance, when our busy lives allow for it. But all that said, so there were 3 or 4 years that were just bad. I was not good at sports. I was good at academics, but doesn't really make friends. I didn't know how to make friends, so I spent most of that time, or much of that time, alone. And fortunately, I was kind of happy with being alone most of the time. But we go from the exclusion to the inclusion part now, and that is that just by chance there was this summer school that was taking place, and one of my very few early friends ended up going to this summer school, which was supposed to be gifted programs. Now, I'm not saying that I was particularly gifted, but I was a little bit off kilter and didn't fit in. So it's like, well, there must be something about this guy that makes him different. So I managed to get into this gifted summer program, and I found my people for the first time. Again, not to say that any of us were all that exceptionally intelligent, but it was just kids who did not fit in other places. It's like you can't send them to these other summer programs because it's not their thing, but instead I got to a summer program that taught statistics, and they did some stuff with role-playing games and electronics, and it was all sort of things that were of interest. So those summer programs, for the 2 years I was in them, they really sustained me, gave me an idea that there was something else out there in the world, and that I was not in for a lifetime of being excluded, that there were people that were out there who actually thought that I was pretty cool to hang out with, I think, or I thought that they were pretty cool to hang out with, but they tolerated me. Whatever the case, there was a community there, and that became a sustaining thing in my life, that I was able to find from then on those communities throughout high school, into university, and into adulthood. And to this day, I've got people that are in those niches where I've been privileged to know a lot of interesting people that tend not to fit in very well. And we don't fit in together, and I guess in that way we create our own sense of normal and what would you call it? Your own baseline of conformity between people who don't fit in. So, having had those lessons, I would say that there's at least some instances where I've tried to be inclusive at all times. And that is, not at all times, not in all contexts, but at the gaming table for role-playing games, for instance. There are times when you get people in who are just, they would have some, say, social or behavioral quirks or even issues, and I would advocate to keep those people at the gaming table, because it's like, this is the social outlet that lets them come together, and people can very clearly tell them, can kind of provide social feedback in this gaming table context to say, this is acceptable behavior, you're doing good, clap, clap, and this is socially unacceptable behavior, and we're not going to put up with that, and be very kind of clear and direct for the people that need that sort of clear and direct guidance. And that's one thing where I've always been very happy at the gaming table to see what we can provide across personality differences, sometimes people who are socially disadvantaged in their abilities to play well with others, to see what we can do to bring that up to par. Give people training wheels at the gaming table to learn how to people more nicely. There have been, however, times that I have excluded people from the gaming table, and the one case I can think of off the top of my head is it mirrors how people approach, or it mirrors the values with which people come in. That is, there was one person who came into the gaming table and was exclusionary of others, and it came to a head when that person said something about, well, I can't accept having this other person join the group unless I know X, Y, Z about them, and am willing to accept their joining. And it's like, well, that is not your choice to make. If we either have to exclude other people unless we get your explicit approval for them, or we just kick you out, we're going to kick you out. So that's just one of those things. It was mirroring the person's own values back at them, and in those cases, being exclusionary seems appropriate. There's also been times when people have been downright vicious to each other, and again, that's a point where you kind of say, well, there's a difference between training someone, bringing them up to speed with kind of the social niceties and what's acceptable and being very clear on what's not acceptable, and those people who come in with the idea that they're going to be disruptive, or they're going to put others down in order to raise themselves up. And that sort of thing just doesn't fly very well with me. I would like to say that in all cases that I would have done, or I would do the right thing. I don't know if that's necessarily the case, especially when we were all 30 years younger. But this is, again, a universal experience. We've all been locked out of things. We've all been included in things. And I hope that for you INFPs and others out there that it's also the universal experience to find other people with whom you get along well. You find your place in your life, you find your community, and you thrive in being with those people. So that's part one, just to talk about it personally. Now part two is going to be more about the channel and that stuff. So I'll get to that in a bit. Thanks and bye for now.